All right, we're going to jump right to it. We're going to create a very simple, the simplest possible React application. It'll be a hello world application, and it'll give us a chance to introduce a couple of aspects in React. React is not really a framework like Angular might be. Instead, it's more considered to be just a library that makes it easy to deal with user interfaces built on using the idea of component, right? Where every single rectangle of user interface might be considered a component, which might be part of a family of components that together build the entire application. So React also forms part of a modern way of thinking of rendering the user interface. Historically, the way we've been building dynamic content was to render HTML dynamically on the server. This is the PHPs, the JSPs, ASPs, Python. All these modern languages have been rendering dynamic content for decades, and very successfully. Only recently, well, not too recent, we've switched over to rendering the content dynamically on the client side instead, where we're only leaving on the server the fact of hosting the dynamic data, right? That a dynamic content can then retrieve, right, and then dynamically render the front end. And React forms part of that new modern way of building web applications, or at least the front end side of the application. So let's build a simple React application. You can this is the React.js official website, and I'd certainly encourage you to go through their tutorial. Part of their tutorial asks you to install an application called the Create React App application. It's a Node.js application, so you'll need to install Node.js. So this assumes you have Node.js installed, and you can install it by just saying npm install global -g means global. Install the create-react app application. And this adds a new command line to your terminal. And then you can just create a application as simply as saying create React app and then the name of the application. So let's start with that. I've already installed the create React app, so I'm not going to install it again. So let's see, new. Let's see. So if we where am I? So let's go to webdev. So we'll go to 2019. We'll go to Spring. And okay, so notice that already we have some projects that we built earlier, the webdev Spring 19 server Java. Now and we're going to be using that still throughout the semester. It'll still host all our middle tier access to data and web services and whatnot. Okay, so this will stick around with us, and this will be the main way that we're going to access data from a database, right? But a little later. We're now going to create another project that's going to be focused on just implementing the front end part of the application, right? So we can create it very simple using the command create React app, and providing the name of the application. I'm going to follow the naming convention of using webdev and then Spring 19, and this is going to be a client-side application. Right, so this is going to be meant to be executed on the browser. Right, so this is data. This is code, JavaScript, HTML, CSS that's going to be downloaded from a server, and it's going to be executed on the browser. Okay, it's going to have its own little server for development purposes. The server is going to be a Node.js server. That its only responsibility would be to allow you to download the JavaScript code and the HTML and the CSS and run it on the browser, okay? And allow you to develop on the browser. Okay? So it is a client-side application, and it's going to be built using React. Right? This is opposed to later on we're going to create another client application, but it's going to be using Angular instead. Right? So remember, on the client side, we're going to be using React first and then Angular. In the middle tier, we're going to use Java this first half of the semester, and then we're going to switch to Node.js as the middle tier. And then for databases, we're going to stick to MySQL the first half of the semester, and then switch to MongoDB the second half of the semester. Make sense? Okay. So this is the client-side application, and it's written in React. So that's gonna download a template application and install all the libraries that we need to run this locally. It'll be a ready to run React application that'll have the default look and feel. We're gonna blow away most of the what they give us, and we're gonna start from scratch, from zero, from nothing. Okay. Again, just to give you the feeling of of having achieved this from scratch. Meanwhile, to get started, we're gonna go into that directory, and we're gonna do an npm start. And so when you install Node.js, it installs two things. Well, several things, but two of the things that we need. Node.js is the Node executable and the npm executable. Here we're using the npm executable. Excuse me. No, we're not going to be using Node quite a bit. Not yet. Not yet. npm stands for Node Package Manager. Right? It allows you to install libraries that are designed for the Node.js framework. Is equivalent to MVN, to Maven. Maven is to Java what npm is to JavaScript or Node. Right? And just like there is Maven as a repository of libraries, of jar files that get downloaded, npm has also a repository. It's called npmjs.org. You can navigate there, and the repository is there. It's an open source repository. Folks can upload their Node.js libraries there, and folks can install them using npm install. Right? In particular, Create React App is one of those libraries that Facebook created as a tool, as a command line interface that we can use to create boilerplate React application. Okay. Now I'm going to make the distinction that these are React.js applications, only because later on in the semester we're going to look at React native applications. So React.js applications are usually meant for or refer to applications that are meant to be executed on browsers, HTML, within HTML in browsers that have a DOM. Later on, when we look at React Native, right, they're meant to be executed on devices, right, mobile devices or even desktop devices. That there is no browser, there is no DOM, there is no HTML, right? Instead, but they use very much of the same ideas, right? So that's usually a distinction. A useful distinction. All right, so it's done. So it created this new client React. So let's go in there. So we're in there, and we can just say npm start. What this is going to do is it's going to compile a couple of things. Oh, I think I might have already something running there somewhere else. Let me see. Maybe here? No. Yeah, I did have something else running. Okay, let's run it again. So this is going to start a Node.js server listening at port 3000. So it's a local Node.js server, and the only thing it's doing is that it's hosting the this tiny little dummy application locally, and we are at the landing page of that application. And really, there's only one page. There's nothing to it, right? We're going to blow this away and start from scratch just to give you an idea of how all this works. Where is that? All right, so we're going to go into it. We're going to blow away the content. Also notice that the content is whatever changes I make immediately are recompiled and deployed to this local server. All right, let me show you. Let's open it up in an IDE. Do I already have something? Close project. And we're going to open our new project. It's under, let's see, Januzzi, webdev 2019, spring. And we have right here, we're going to open that up. Okay, so we have a couple of things in here. One of the things that we have here is a directory called node_modules. Right, that's a particular idiosyncrasy of the Node.js framework. When you create a Node.js project, what happens is that any libraries that project might depend on are downloaded and copied into a node_module. So any libraries, so these are all the libraries that this rinky-dinky application needs, right? It downloads all the dependencies and installs them here. This is the equivalent of the M2 directory where Maven keeps all its libraries. Where you do a Maven clean install, it downloads all those libraries and it copies them, I think, under .m2 repositories. Right. So this is the equivalent. Right. Also under here we just have one single index page, which it's very trivial. Notice that the only real content here is this. Notice the body, the opening body tag, and the closing body tag. See that? And there's only this index, this div ID equal root. See that? And it's empty. There's no content. So one might ask, where did this all come from? Right? What's all this image and all this text and all that? Where is that all coming from? Well, that's part of the aspect of single page applications. Single page applications is that we're going to mostly be doing most of our work in a single page, right? In a single index.html page. And we're going to strategically load content, DOM elements, templates that we are going to then dynamically add to the DOM, fed with data that dynamically just expands into multiple content. Right? We're never going to actually navigate from one page to the next. We're going to provide the illusion of navigating from one page to the next by throwing away some DOM elements and replacing them with some other DOM elements. Right, giving the illusion of going from one screen to another screen. But we're never actually going to physically navigate, click on a URL, dump the entire page, and then replace it with an entire different page. We're never going to do that. Okay? That's the intent of a single page application. You can still give the navigation functionality, but without actually leaving the page. You're always in this one index page. And that div right there, that div ID equal root, that's where all the content is going to be injected dynamically, right? That's the placeholder of where everything is going to be injected, removed, added, dynamically using JavaScript. Make sense? All right. So this root ID, this root ID is referenced inside of the source file here. In the source directory, we see that there's a one index.js, right? This index.js. What it has is really the only thing that means anything here are these two import statements. Right? Remember when we did last week we did iffy statements where we encapsulated self-invoking functions, right? So that to deal with namespaces and whatnot. Well, new versions of JavaScript do away with that, or the need to do that, right? They implement a fully modern manipulation of modules, right? Wherever you declare inside of a module is self-contained, right? It does not litter the namespace outside of that module. If you want to use things that are declared in other modules, you can import them. Right, and this is exactly what the new version of JavaScript gives us, right? ES6. Here we are importing classes, right, or objects or instances from some other library, right? In this case, other modules. React and React DOM are the root core libraries that the Facebook React libraries provide us. The React one is the core functionality, whereas the React DOM is specific to functionality that's specific to the fact that we're using browsers, right? And we're using a DOM as a mechanism for rendering the content. Later on, when we use React Native, we won't be using React DOM. We'll still be using React, but we won't be using React DOM. Instead, we'll use some other library that will target a specific set of mobile applications, right? It has its own tags that will allow you to render things on a mobile screen as opposed to using DOM for targeting browsers. Yes? So those two libraries, certainly we're always going to have to include them. The other real aspect here of interest here is this React DOM.render. React DOM.render, right? So this is the entry point of the entire application. This is the entry point that takes two arguments. The render function takes two arguments. One is what content do you want me to render? And the second argument, where in the DOM do you want me to put it? Right? Notice that there's a document.getElementById in there that is referring to the root, right? The div that has that root, right? That's where all is going to be injected. What's going to be injected in there? It's this weird element here, app, right? That looks like a tag, but it's not really a tag, right? It only looks like a tag because React is trying to use the fact that we understand how HTML works, and it wants to lower the bar of entry here. It says you know how HTML works, so let me represent this as an HTML element for you. It's a component app. It's a component that we loaded from here, and if we can navigate in here, that this is the actual content. The actual content it's a JavaScript class. Right? Again, this is ES6, and ES6 introduces all these modern concepts of classes, modules, interfaces, all things that have been around in modern programming languages for ages. Right? Now they're also available in JavaScript. And so this is a class that extends this component. It's a React component, and it's using this new concept that you should think of user interface, any user little widget that you see on the screen could be a component, at any level of complexity. Maybe an input field is a component, or an input field together with a button is a component together, right? Or maybe a combination of input field, a drop down, and a button, that is a component, right? So at different levels of complexity, you might choose to combine multiple little widgets to make an entire component. Right? And you can choose a granularity of what a component means to you. Right? Here, the granularity was that I want an entire page. Right? I want a div that takes up the entire width of the screen, right, and draws this image and draws this text down below. Okay? And the way the component is a class that declares a function called render. Here we are overriding the render function and providing an actual implementation, right? And the implementation is that it returns some HTML elements, right? So and the HTML here is divs, headers, images. So everything inside of the return function is just plain old HTML. There's nothing weird about that, right? But the whole component, the whole content of that page has been abstracted into a single element called the app element over here, which then can be used as if it were an HTML element, right? So this is what React brings to the table, is a mechanism that allows you to define, sub-elements that can be defined in terms of other elements, defined in terms of other elements, and you can have a very deep hierarchy, right, of ever more complex elements. Ultimately, these elements have to be defined in terms of the lowest elements, which are HTML elements. You can't go any further down than just HTML elements, right? And so everything eventually needs to be defined as HTML elements, right? But then they can be combined at any level of complexity that you want. Okay. All right. So we're gonna blow this away. This whole thing, all the source directory. So let's blow that away. So it's gone. Right, so if we go back, notice that it's trying to compile that index file, but it doesn't find it anymore. Right? So that's one of the aspects of this development environment, is that it has a watcher. Right? It's listening to any changes, to any files, anything in that directory, and whenever it finds something, it tries to compile it. Now, what do you mean compile? I mean, wasn't this a front-end framework? Well, yes, it's a front end. Framework, but notice that we had in there some weird HTML embedded inside of JavaScript, and so there was some weird things going on, right? So that's referred to as JSX. So JavaScript. I understand what X remembers extended JavaScript, which allows you to mix basically XML, with JavaScript. It allows you to combine the two dynamically. So let's get started. Let's play around with creating our own index.js. So let's create index.js. And we'll need to import here. Import React from React. And we'll import React DOM from React DOM. There it is. And we'll need to do what we did earlier, right? So we're going to do a React DOM.render, and render takes two arguments, as I said earlier, right? It takes some content, hello world, and it takes also the element that we're going to inject this content in. So this is document get element by ID, and this would be root. So if we go back, it's going to recompile everything and convert it into this content. What do I mean by recompile? Well, notice that this seems like some weird mixture of JavaScript with some embedded HTML. Okay, typically in other languages such as PHP or you might find that it's the other way around, where you have most HTML and you have some snippets of embedded PHP or some embedded Java or some embedded C# or whatnot. Here's it's a little bit different. Here we have some kind of an embedding of the two worlds seamlessly together. So notice that you have H1 there with no quotes, no need for concatenating any text. What the compiling part of this is that it needs to convert that into actual JavaScript, right? That takes that as a string and then appends it or adds it to a DOM element inside of the element that we give it, the ID there, right? So this gets compiled down to some intermediate JavaScript, right? That it's understandable by most browsers, right? It needs to compile down to a minimum common denominator, making sure that whatever JavaScript gets generated is understood by most browsers. And most browsers won't even understand what import is, right? Or classes or any of that, right? Or extends, any of that. That's not, I mean, even though it's part of the new JavaScript standard, most browsers still don't understand the full extent of the JavaScript. It's not fully supported yet, right, across all browsers. So what this compilation part happens is that, well, not really compiling. It's more like transpiling. It's taking one version of a language and convert it to another version of the same language, right? So it's into a lower common denominator that's understood by most browsers. Make sense? All right. All right. So excellent. We have a hello world element, and what we'd like to be able to do is to make this available in Heroku. So let's do that. So we can let's do a tab here. Let's see what we have. Git status. All right, a couple of things. We removed app.css. We removed app.js. We don't want that .idea. So let's add that to the ignore. In the git ignore, let's add here .idea. All right, so idea is no longer in there. It's okay that we removed all those files and that we modified the git ignore and we added the index file. Very good. So git status, git branch. So we're in the master branch, and remember not to work in the master branch. So git checkout -b hello world. So in here we've worked there. We're going to add all those files. and we're going to commit saying added hello world example. All right, so we have that branch, very good. And we would typically ask one of the teammates to merge this. Once we're done doing this, we can then merge it back into master. We merge it, and now we can perhaps push this to deploy it in Heroku. So let's do that. We've committed. I think we're done, right? Git log, right? We have added hello world. We have that, very good. And we're going to create a new project, Heroku project. We did this last week or the week before. We did it for a Java project, right? This time around, notice that we have a package.json file in there. See that? This is the equivalent of our pom.xml file in Java, right? Just like pom.xml it's an XML file that declares dependencies of this project. So package.json is the same thing. If we take a look at the package.json, it will display dependencies, say that our particular project depends on these other libraries, right? So make sure that whenever you compile this, whenever you install this, download all those libraries. Otherwise, it won't work. Okay. So just like last week when we did Heroku create, it created a Java project, right? And it knew what it needed to create to deploy remotely. And the reason it knew it was a Java project is because we saw it was a POM file. It says, this is a Java project. I'll create a server where I can host this. Same thing, when we do Heroku create, it's going to look at this and going to say, it's got a package.json file. It's a Node.js server, right? It's not a Java project. So it knows, it can detect what kind of project this is. Okay? And so we're going to push this to Heroku into Evening Forest 17.4.81. So we'll push it there. So notice it's determined that it's a NPM. It's a package.json, so it knows that it's a node engine that it needs. So it's generating our environment remotely, right? It's setting up all the libraries. It's going to run an npm install remotely on the other end, right? And it's going to get our server up and running. So it looked at this, identified installing the node modules that are declared in package.json. So it's downloading the React DOM, the React packages, any of those libraries. And finally, we can once that is done, we can run Heroku open, and we can have our hello world. There it is. So it's creating our node underscore modules and downloading the libraries and copying them in node underscore modules. Oftentimes, if you do an npm install locally on your machine, and everything's working fine, and if you forget to declare that dependency in the projects.json file, and you push this to Heroku, it'll work locally, but it won't work remotely, because if you don't put the dependency, Node.js or Heroku won't know that it needs that dependency. So make sure that whatever dependencies you need are declared in your package.json file, and we'll see how to do that in a minute. Okay, so it's been deployed. Looks like it worked. We're going to open. So this is going to open up our Evening Forest deployed on Heroku app.com. It's still up and running to load the server, and hopefully in a second it will display hello world. Excellent. So it's deployed on Heroku. So we're going to be working, as we go forward in the assignments, you're going to be working on both of these two projects, on the Java side and on the React side, right? You're going to create a user interfaces. You'll create web services for posting, for getting data from the server, and you're going to retrieve them from this client, right? And then you're going to render content dynamically on the React side. So these two are going to work together. These two applications are going to be working together. All right. I think we created a hello world component. Okay, so let's expand on